I'm Goldie. Picture this, I'm 30, hitched to a solid guy, Alex. He's got the reins of this family gig, a trading company that's been in his bloodline since before I was even an idea. I land a gig there not long after we tie the knot, slinging deals as a sales agent. And guess what? Figures shot through the roof the minute I started. Alex gets a kick out of it, always cracks the same joke, babe, you didn't just bring love, you hauled in the big bucks too. So, there's your fairy tale start, right? But life's got a funny way of throwing you curveballs. Now, Mary, the mother-in-law, she's a piece of work, you know? And Cynthia, her daughter, she prances around like she's Queen Bee because she's got some fancy letters behind her name. It's my first dinner at their place, and I'm all dolled up, trying to make a good impression. We're sitting there, around this table that's too big for any sort of cozy conversation, and the third degree starts. So, Goldie, Mary starts, peering at me like I'm some specimen under a microscope. Which college did you grace with your presence? I tell her straight, went to state. Got my degree and learned a ton about the real world. She snorts, and there's this moment, brief as a heartbeat, where I see Cynthia trying to hide her own sneer. State, Mary echoes, like it tastes bad just saying it. And Cynthia, oh, she jumps right in, smug as a cat in the cream. An MBA from Harvard on my end, she flaunts, leaning back with this smirk that got under my skin in a real quick minute. I'm not one to back down, so I shoot back, cool, but it's what you got up here. I tap my head. That matters, not where you sat on your butt getting it. Their chuckles go cold, but I don't give a toss. I'm not there to play doormat to their uptown attitudes. Dinner wraps up, and I'm thinking, okay, rocky start, but we can smooth this over, right? Wrong. Next thing I know, Alex is getting an earful from Mary about how Cynthia, the golden child, should join us at the company. And it ain't just any old job she's vying for, she's shotgunning straight for my department's top spot. Well, she has an MBA from Harvard, Alex. Mary presses, stating the obvious like it's some trump card. She's perfect for head of sales. And what's nuttier is Alex actually caves. Before I can even protest, it's a done deal. Cynthia waltzes in like she owns the place, and here I thought we were playing fair in love and war. From day one, she's throwing her weight around, lips curled in this permanent sneer every time our paths cross. I get it, lady, you think you're hot stuff. But around these parts, you gotta earn your stripes, not just show 'em. It wasn't so much what she said, it's what she did, or didn't do. You get me? It's the coffee she'd let go cold when an intern brought it to her, the sideways glances and snide digs at my expense, the way she'd talk shop as if she's got years on me. Alex sees it, I know he does, but what's he gonna do? It's his mom and sis firing at him with both barrels if he steps out of line. I land at work, and it's like walking into a storm. Cynthia's there, perched at her desk like she's the captain of a ship. But here's the kicker, she ain't sailing, she's sinking us, one bad decision at a time. Take last Tuesday. I'm in early, coffee in hand, trying to keep things afloat, and in struts Cynthia, dropping her purse with a thud that says, I'm in charge. She calls me into her office, right? Sits me down and starts in with this list of orders that'd choke a horse. Goldie, see these files? She waves some papers at me, scattered like confetti. Fix them. And I need it yesterday. I'm staring at this mess and thinking, lady, you've done lost your mind. But I bite my tongue, nod, and get to it. Fast forward a couple of hours, and I'm untangling her knots, right? That's when Mr. Jacobs calls. This guy's big league, think whales in a sea of fish. I can hear the tension a mile away. What's this crap Cynthia sent me, Goldie? He barks through the line. I asked for projections, not preschool scribbles. I'm juggling phones, trying to soothe him. Mr. Jacobs, I got this. Give me an hour. I hang up, track Cynthia down, and she's there painting her nails like she's at a spa. Cynthia, you gotta double check your work. Jacobs is ready to walk. She doesn't even glance up. Not my prob, Goldie. You handle it. So there I am, patching holes in a sinking ship while she's giving herself a manicure. I spend the whole day in damage control, but hey, I do love a challenge. And Jacobs? He's cool by the time we're done, thanks to yours truly. But it doesn't end there, oh no. You think she'd say thanks? As if. The next day, I catch wind of a meeting, right? Alex and Cynthia are at it, voices through the roof. I sidle up to the door, and who do I run into but Mary, listening in like it's the season finale of her favorite show. I'm about to step in, but she grips my arm, nails digging in like claws. Leave them, she hisses, all snake-like. This is family business. I wrench free, feeling her eyes on my back, and open the door. There's Cynthia, tears and all, playing up a storm. Alex, I'm trying, but Goldie's always undermining me. I'm floored. If her lies were dirt, we'd be buried alive. Alex is standing there, and I can see he's torn. He wants to believe his wife, but Sister Dearest is laying it on thick. I speak up. Alex, come on. You and I know that's a load of bull. Cynthia whips around, all drama. See? She points right at me, accusing like I'm the bad guy in some cheap novel. We're nose to nose, practically. You wanna explain, Jacobs, then? I challenge her, my voice level. Alex pipes up, tired lines around his eyes. Enough, both of you. I take a deep breath, ready to battle this out, but Mary barges in, cutting the air like a knife. Goldie's just jealous, Alex. You can see it. I'm about to say my piece, but it's like talking to a wall with those two, no, three. They've made up their minds, and I'm the villain in their fairy tale. It was a Tuesday, nothing out of the ordinary, until I got the call. Alex had a wreck. Some jerk ran a red and my world flipped upside down. The hospital, the blinking machines, Alex looking too still, it was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I was in that hospital room, feeling like someone scooped out my insides. But here's the deal, which, trust me, made my heart sink even lower if that's possible. According to Alex's will, only a blood relative can take over the company. That should have been our kids, if we had any. Without them, it defaulted to his next of kin, which turned out to be his sister, Cynthia. So, just like that, I'm on the outside looking in. My husband isn't even cold, and already the wolves are circling. So while I'm drowning in grief, here come Mary and Cynthia, all pep and no sympathy, already divvying up the spoils before the battle's even done. Cynthia wastes no time throwing it in my face, right there in the hospital corridor. You see, Goldie, it's all clear-cut. Alex's will is as plain as day. Blood relatives only. With Alex. She trails off, like even saying coma would jinx her takeover. I could barely keep the snarl from my voice. So, what? You're dancing on his grave already? The man is fighting for his life. She just rolled her eyes, as cold as the sterile hospital walls. Business waits for no one, dear. It's unfortunate, yes, but we must think of the future. And as for you, she stepped closer. Well, you were just the wife. As I see it, you were never really part of the company, not like family. Mary nodded, her lips in a thin line. Cynthia's right. You have no children, Goldie. It was always going to be her. That was it. Their true colors, loud and clear. They didn't give a damn about Alex, only about what they could grab from his still warm hands. I walked away from them, my mind a chaos of grief and fury. I had to do something, but what? Every fiber of my being was woven into that company, into the life Alex and I had built. I wasn't just going to let them steal it. Days turned to weeks, and Alex didn't wake up. The company felt his absence like a missing limb, and Cynthia's reign didn't sit right with anyone, they all felt it too. One afternoon, Cynthia blocked my path by the copier, her arms folded over her chest. Still here, Goldie? I'd have thought you'd take the hint and leave with some dignity. I locked eyes with her, my back ramrod straight. Dignity? You wouldn't recognize it if it bit you. This isn't over, Cynthia. Her laugh was empty, but her eyes were sharp. Oh, it's over. It was over the minute that Will was drafted. Alex's beloved wife or not, you're nothing to this company. Better start looking for a new job. I bit the inside of my cheek, tasting blood. We'll see. I turned on my heel and left her standing there. Her words were meant to cut deep, but they just fueled a fire in me. I wasn't about to roll over. The employees, they were with me, they knew where the heart of the company lay, and it wasn't with Cynthia. Day in and day out, I found myself in the same routine, pulling up a chair next to Alex's hospital bed after surviving another round of corporate warfare. The beep of the machines had become my unfortunate companion, the soundtrack to our one-sided conversations. Despite the coma, I'd tell Alex everything, hoping, praying he could hear me. Alex, you won't believe the circus your company's turned into, I'd start, my voice a low murmur, laced with fatigue. Your sister, she's taken over, bulldozed her way through the board, and camped out in your office like she's queen of the castle. She's axed Dan and Rita, just like that, because they wouldn't bow down. And the clients? They're jumping ship left and right. The Henderson deal, the one you worked months on, is dead in the water. They've had it with her. Each visit blurred into the next, the hospital walls absorbing my endless monologue, full of updates and frustrations. I'd scoff and curse, my tone growing bitter as I recounted the latest sabotage. And let's not get started on your mom, I continued, the bitterness in my voice growing sharper. She struts around the office now, tossing digs at me every chance she gets. When Alex wakes up, you're out, she sniped at me yesterday. As if I haven't poured my soul into this company too. I felt the sting of tears threatening to spill, talking to Alex's motionless form. My husband, the man who promised to tackle life's ups and downs with me, was silent, caught in an endless sleep. Yet, I clung to the sliver of hope that someday he'd crack open his eyes and we'd really talk. Then it happened, so unexpectedly it knocked the breath out of me. In the middle of a particularly tough rant about how his sister's latest stunt might be the downfall of the entire business, Alex's eyes flicked open. They found mine, and the corners of his lips turned up in what I knew was meant to be a reassuring grin. It was a bittersweet smile that didn't quite reach the old spark that used to dance in his eyes, but it was more than enough. Alex, you're back? Can you hear me? My voice cracked, a mix of joy and disbelief. Before I could let the moment get the better of me, his hand, stronger than I'd felt in ages, clasped mine, and he gave a near imperceptible shake of his head. It was a silent plea to keep this moment between us. You sly dog, I said, a laugh bubbling out of me in relief. We're keeping this our little secret then, huh? His smile said it all as he closed his eyes again, like this was just a brief break from his rest. But that grip on my hand didn't let up. I leaned in close. All right, Your Highness, we'll play it your way. We'll let them think nothing's changed. But you and me, we're gonna turn this around. Wait and see. Leaving the hospital that night felt different. There was something like hope, or was it defiance, brewing inside me. I'd go to the office tomorrow, face Cynthia and his mom, and act like it was all the same, all while knowing Alex was coming back to me. Days turned into weeks, holding in the secret like clenching a fist around a live wire. That wire jolted out of my hands the day I got called to the lion's den, or what used to be Alex's place before Cynthia turned it into a sort of throne room for her ego. I walked into that office, a storm brewing in my chest. Cynthia was perched on the edge of Alex's desk like she was waiting for a parade in her honor. Mary lounged in a corner, looking all smug. Time to hit the road, Cynthia tossed the words out without even looking directly at me. She had the termination papers already laid out like she was dealing cards at a shoddy casino. Mary piped up from her corner with that gravelly voice of hers, with Alex out of the picture, Cynthia's running the show. I was one twitch away from telling them where they could shove those papers, but I clenched my fists, instead, teeth grinding. And just like some Hollywood timing, the door swung open with a bang. There was Alex. He looked rough around the edges, but still standing, still breathing, still mine. Cynthia's face dropped like she just swallowed a bug. Alex didn't miss a beat. "Cynthia, get out of my chair." He spat the words out. His voice held less of its usual command, sure, but it had a bite. My eyes could barely peel away from him, but I had to see Cynthia's reaction. Her face twisted like she was chewing on glass. "What the, Alex? How are you?" Alex cut her off. "Standing? Talking? Surprise, sis. I'm not as gone as you hoped." Mary tried to back her daughter up. "This isn't happening. He's supposed to be drooling in a bed?" "Yeah, well, life's full of surprises." Alex snapped back, his eyes never leaving Cynthia. "Now, off my chair. We're going to have a real nice chat." Cynthia stood, stumbling a bit like her legs were made of wet noodles. "You can't just come back and what? Take back my company?" "Oh, I think I can," Alex interrupted, moving closer to his desk. I stepped forward, standing next to Alex. "The two of us. United front." "Yeah, Cynthia." I pitched in. "Hurling people out on their asses is your specialty. Time to see how it feels, huh?" Cynthia clenched her jaw so tight I could hear her teeth grind, while Mary was still trying to process the scene, looking like her software crashed. "Alex, you're sick. I need my company back. You two," he waved a dismissive hand at them. "You're done here." Cynthia's face was now the color of rotten tomatoes. "I'll call the board. They won't stand for this." Alex looked over at me, a knowing glint in his eye. "The board's in on it, aren't they, babe?" I nodded, barely holding back a smile. "Yep. Heard from them this morning. They're thrilled you're back. Even sent flowers." Cynthia still tried to have the last word. "This isn't over, Alex." "No, it is. For you." Alex's words cut her off, as short and final as a door slam. Cynthia's eyes flitted between Alex and me, the defeat finally sinking in as she grabbed her mom's arm. They left, not with the whiff of victory but with tails between their legs. Then, it was just us, alone in the room that had seen more drama than a daytime soap. "You played it well, Alex. Had me scared too," I managed to say, my voice shaking off the last bits of worry and fear. He slumped into his chair, looked up at me with those eyes I fell for. Had to make it believable. Couldn't let them ruin everything we've built. I took his hand, a surge of pride washing over me. "They didn't. And they won't." Alex's grip on my hand tightened, the fight still there. Time for some damage control. I shot back, more like a full-on fixer-upper. "But together, we'll patch it up." Alex laughed, that familiar sound, but this time it was a little more victorious. I laughed too. It was over, this round at least. We were back in the game, Alex and I, ready to rebuild and face whatever came next. The office was humming like a kicked anthill when I walked in, fresh energy lighting up the place. With the dead weights cut off, Alex's office felt like a command center ready for a new mission. His recovery had flipped the switch on our future, and we were gunning the engine hard. I found Alex in the middle of the fray, barking orders to the team but with a grin that said he was back to his old self. "Okay, team. Let's not waste any more time," he said. "We've got a whole chunk of backlog to clear and new deals to chase." I leaned against the doorframe, watching my husband rally the troops. He caught sight of me and winked. "Hey, you're part of this too. Roll up your sleeves." Chuckling, I walked over. "Do I get a title for this or just the usual Alex's better half?" He chuckled. "How about co-captain?" Co-captain rang out well, so I nodded. "Co-captain, reporting for duty." Turning to the team, Alex made introductions. "Everyone, meet the co-captain of this ship. She steered it through the storm while I was out." The team clapped, and a few here's rolled through the group. It felt good, really good, like we were a family that had weathered the worst. As the team dispersed to get back to work, I sat down with Alex. So, what's the game plan? I asked, comfy in the swivel chair I had commandeered. We're shaking the tree, babe, ditching the bad apples that Cynthia brought in. Alex sounded pumped. There were spreadsheets all over his desk, plans scribbled on paper. I pointed to the papers. Hiring new blood? Yep. And we're putting money into developing our team. Training, seminars. No more throwing them in the deep end, he replied, highlighting a section that said team growth. I added, not just survival of the fittest, then. Alex shook his head. Nah, it's about thriving, not just surviving. We both knew the buzz in the office was more than just people being busy. It was hope, rebooted and recharged. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ted, our old supplier. Hey, he's asking about the contracts. Should we bring him back in? Alex paused for a moment. Yeah, I think it's time. He was with us since the start. Let's not ditch loyalty. I nodded. Loyalty pays. I'll draft up something nice and comfy. The word comfy had Alex grinning. He knew that meant terms good enough to lock Ted in tightly. Just as I was about to get up and get to it, Alex grabbed my hand. Hey, I never got to say it properly, thank you. For not giving up when I was, well, you know. I squeezed his hand. No need for thanks. It's us against the world, right? Right, he confirmed, and we locked eyes in a moment of silent understanding, the kind that said we were a team, through thick and thin. My phone vibrated. It was Cynthia, rambling on about another blown job interview. They don't get it, you know? I'm leadership material, they want me to start from scratch. No way. Alex overheard and shook his head. She needs to start at the bottom, learn to crawl before she can boss around. I nodded. Right. But try telling her that. Cynthia wasn't the only family headache. Alex's mom was a constant buzz in our background, mad about the money tap getting twisted shut. She called again, and Alex glanced at the phone, letting it ring out. Your mom again? I asked, already knowing the answer. He sighed. Yep. She's been blowing up my phone since I stopped the cash flow. The memories of them assuming the worst when Alex was sick, bordering on vulture circling, stayed fresh. Alex finally picked up on the fifth ring, keeping it clipped. Mom, it's done. You've got to deal with it. The line got real loud, real quick. His mother's voice shrilled through, but Alex held his ground. When the call ended, he was tired but firm. No more free rides. I wrapped an arm around him. You okay? He nodded. Yeah, it's just draining. Let's not let them spoil tonight, okay? I suggested, wanting to steer clear of the drama for once. Agreed. Besides, he said, there's something better to talk about. His hint hung in the air, and I smiled. A baby? He smiled back, full of hope and love, his eyes lighting up at the possibility. Shifting gears from family drama to our own little unit felt like the right move. The notion of a kid, of starting fresh with our own small tribe, seemed to seal the deal on the new beginnings front. Turning off the lights, locking up the office that was once a battleground, we left for the day, hand in hand, a team thinking about adding a new member. Beneath the calm of making plans for the future, there's that undercurrent of family strain. But it's getting easier to let their calls go to voicemail, to ignore the bitter texts. We're not cold, just done. Done with the guilt trips, the scrambling to appease. It's about our little family now. And maybe, just maybe, this fresh start isn't just a new chapter in the business. Driving home, I sat with that thought, thumbing the little baby shoes we'd impulsively bought, a symbol of hope, of new life. So, about baby names, Alex started. I smothered a laugh. Already? He shrugged. Never too early. The streetlights flickered past, each one a beacon in the easy silence of our drive, each one guiding us away from the chaos and towards something better.
The evening air was tense, a prelude to the storm brewing in our living room. What do you mean she's moving in tomorrow? I asked Greg, my voice barely containing the shock and anger. Greg didn't even flinch. It's decided, Elise. Mom's coming to live with us. It makes sense, especially now. How can you make such a decision alone? I countered, feeling the walls of our home closing in on me. What about our plans, the rooms? He had that all-knowing look, the one that always set me on edge. We'll convert your home office. It's the only logical solution. My office? Greg, that's my space, my sanctuary. You don't really need it, he said dismissively. Besides, I pay the rent here, $3,000 a month. That gives me a say in how we use the space. I was stunned. This house, the one my parents had passed down to me, now felt alien, controlled by Greg's financial hold over it. But this is my family home, I whispered, more to myself than to him. Greg's voice was cold, devoid of the warmth I once fell in love with. Your family home or not, I'm the one footing the bills now. Get your stuff cleared out by tomorrow. That night, I couldn't sleep. The realization that our marriage was a facade, built on the shaky grounds of financial power and silent submission, hit me hard. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my office being emptied. Marion, Greg's mother, arrived with her suitcases, an unwelcome guest in my own home. In the days that followed, the tension escalated. Marion's presence was overbearing. She rearranged the kitchen, criticized my cooking, and worst of all, she had this way of subtly belittling me in front of my daughter, Mia. I felt like a stranger, tiptoeing around my own life. Greg became more distant. His conversations were curt, his nights late. Our home, once filled with laughter and shared dreams, now echoed with the sounds of unspoken resentments and forced politeness. One evening, I overheard Greg and Marion discussing finances. Elise doesn't contribute much anyway, Marion scoffed. She should be grateful we're letting her stay. I felt a surge of anger. This was my family home, a place of cherished memories, now being reduced to financial transactions and power plays. The next morning, I confronted Greg. I want to talk about the rent, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. This was my family's home. I never agreed to pay rent. Greg's response was a mix of arrogance and indifference. Well, things change, Elise. I'm paying the bills, so technically it's more my house than yours now. That was the moment I knew. Our marriage, a delicate balance of love and compromise, had crumbled under the weight of control and disrespect. I called my father, Nolan, my voice shaking. Dad, I need your help. It's about Greg. As I hung up, I realized that this was just the beginning. I wasn't going to let Greg and Marion turn my life into their dominion. They might have underestimated me, thinking I'd crumble under their control. But they were wrong. I was my father's daughter, and I knew a thing or two about standing my ground. Sitting in the empty room that used to be my office, I couldn't help but reminisce about the early days with Greg. We were like two pieces of a puzzle, fitting perfectly with our differences. But now, those differences were tearing us apart. I remembered our first date, how Greg's laughter had echoed in the autumn air, how he had looked at me as if I was the only person in the world. It was hard to reconcile that memory with the man who had just usurped my family home. My phone buzzed, pulling me back from the past. It was a text from my father, Nolan. I'll take care of it. Meet me at the shop tomorrow. Nolan's auto repair shop had been a staple of my childhood. It was more than a business. It was a testament to his hard work and dedication. That shop, much like our family home, held memories of a life once filled with warmth and togetherness. The next day, I walked into the familiar scent of oil and metal. Dad was under a car, his hands expertly moving as he worked. Dad, I called out. He slid out, wiping his hands. Elise, let's talk in the office. The office was a small room filled with trophies from car shows and framed photos of our family. It was a capsule of happier times. I can't believe Greg is doing this, Dad said, his eyes reflecting a mix of anger and concern. I sighed. I know, Dad. I think it's time for some payback. Dad nodded, a determined look crossing his face. What do you have in mind? I want Greg and Marion out of the house, but I want to do it legally, make them feel the pinch of their actions. Dad leaned back in his chair, pondering. We can draw up a rental agreement, hike up the rent, make it impossible for them to stay. I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. This was the first step in reclaiming my life, but it also meant declaring war on Greg and Marion. Let's do it, I said, the resolve in my voice surprising even me. Over the next few days, Dad and I worked on the rental agreement. It was a meticulous and strategic plan, designed to legally corner Greg and Marion. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction imagining their faces when they'd see the new terms. Meanwhile, back at the house, Marion's true colors began to show more vividly. She complained about everything, from the way I dressed Mia to the brand of coffee I bought. Her words were like needles, subtle but piercing. One evening, I overheard her on the phone. "Yes, I've finally got a lease under my thumb. This house will be ours soon." Fury and disbelief coursed through me. How could she be so callous, so manipulative? But her words also steeled my resolve. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about protecting Mia from this toxic environment. The day came to present the rental agreement to Greg and Marion. I walked into the living room, the document in my hand, my heart pounding in my chest. "Greg, we need to talk about the house," I said, my voice steady. He looked up, surprised. "What about it?" I handed him the document. "It's the new rental agreement. You need to read it." As Greg's eyes scanned the pages, I saw a range of emotions flicker across his face. Confusion, disbelief, and finally anger. "This is absurd. The rent's been raised tenfold." "Yes," I said, meeting his gaze. "It's the market rate for this property. If you can't afford it, you'll have to find somewhere else to live." Greg's face turned red, his anger palpable. "You can't do this to us." "I can, and I am," I replied, feeling a sense of empowerment I hadn't felt in years. "This is my family home, Greg. You've forgotten that, but I haven't." The days following the presentation of the rental agreement were a blend of silent battles and open confrontations. Marion's true nature, once hidden under a veil of polite intrusion, now emerged in full force. One evening, I was setting the table for dinner when Marion entered the kitchen. Her eyes quickly scanned the room, landing on the simple yet nutritious meal I had prepared. "This is what you call dinner," she scoffed. "Back in my day, we knew how to provide for our families properly." I clenched my teeth, forcing a polite smile. "It's healthy, and Mia likes it." Marion snorted, dismissing my efforts with a wave of her hand. "Children don't know what's good for them. It's up to us to teach them. Clearly, you lack that understanding." Her words stung, but I remained composed. I had learned that reacting to Marion only fueled her disdain. As the days went by, Marion's presence became more oppressive. She criticized my parenting, my housekeeping, even my choice of clothes. It was as if she was deliberately trying to provoke me. One afternoon, I returned home from a quick errand to find Mia in tears and Marion sitting calmly in the living room, reading a magazine. "What happened?" I asked, rushing to comfort my daughter. "Your child is just being fussy, as usual," Marion replied without looking up. "I don't have the patience for such nonsense." I held Mia close, feeling a surge of protective anger. How could she be so cold towards her own granddaughter? Later that week, I had a meeting with a potential client for my small business. "Marion, could you please watch Mia for a couple of hours?" I asked, hoping for a bit of cooperation. Marion looked at me, her expression one of annoyance. "Fine, but make it quick. I have plans later." I returned from the meeting to find Mia once again in distress. Marion was nowhere in sight. After calming Mia down, I confronted Marion. "Where were you? I trusted you to look after her." Marion rolled her eyes. "I had to step out for a bit. She was sleeping, anyway. What's the big deal?" The big deal was that Marion's selfishness was now affecting Mia, my most precious treasure. I realized then that Marion would never change. Her contempt for me had spilled over to Mia, and I wouldn't tolerate it any longer. I called my father that night, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and determination. "Dad, it's getting worse. She's not just targeting me now. She's neglecting Mia." Nolan's response was swift and resolute. "We need to speed up our plan. It's not safe for you and Mia there anymore." The following day I saw Greg and Marion whispering in the living room, their heads close together in conspiracy. "What are you two plotting now?" I asked, a hard edge to my voice. Greg looked up, his expression one of feigned innocence. "Just discussing some financial matters. Nothing for you to worry about." But I knew better. The rental agreement had unsettled them, and now they were scrambling. I could almost smell their desperation, a scent that, under different circumstances, might have been satisfying. Instead, I felt a cold resolve settling in my heart. They had underestimated me, thinking I would crumble under their pressure. But they were wrong. I was ready to fight back, not just for myself, but for Mia. The battle lines were drawn, and I was no longer just a passive player in their game of control. I was about to change the rules entirely. Every day in the house felt like walking on a tightrope. Marian's presence loomed large, a constant source of negativity. Her comments were like thorns, pricking away at my patience and resolve. One evening, as I put Mia to bed, I overheard Marian speaking to Greg in hushed tones in the living room. "Elise is not fit to be a mother. She's too soft, too indecisive. You need someone who can actually run a household efficiently." I stood frozen, listening to their conversation. Greg's reply was a weak agreement, a betrayal that cut deeper than any of Marian's sharp words. The next day, I confronted Greg. "Do you really think I'm a bad mother?" I asked, my voice shaking. Greg avoided my gaze. "It's not just about being a mother, Elise. It's about being responsible, about being adequate." Adequate. The word echoed in my mind, a stinging indictment of my role in this family. As the days passed, Marian's manipulations grew bolder. She rearranged the furniture to her liking, disposed of items she deemed unnecessary, and took over the kitchen, effectively pushing me to the margins of my own home. One day I came home to find Mia crying inconsolably. Marian was in the kitchen, completely ignoring her. "Why aren't you attending to her?" I demanded, my heart racing with worry. Marian shrugged, a cold detachment in her eyes. "She needs to learn to soothe herself. It's part of growing up." That night I called my father, my voice a mix of anger and desperation. "I can't do this anymore, Dad. Greg and Marian are destroying everything I hold dear. I need to get out." Nolan's response was immediate and firm. "You and Mia come stay with me. We'll sort this out." I hesitated. Leaving the house meant giving up the fight, but staying meant subjecting Mia and myself to more torment. The decision crystallized the next morning when I found my personal belongings boxed up in the garage. Marian had decided they were cluttering the house. That act of violation was the final straw. I packed our essentials, taking one last look at the home that had once been a haven of love and happiness. As I closed the door behind me, a sense of relief washed over me. I was leaving behind the oppressive walls of that house, but I was also stepping into the unknown. Staying with my father brought a sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. Mia's laughter returned, filling the house with joy. But the battle was far from over. I met with my lawyer to discuss the divorce. "I want full custody of Mia," I stated firmly, "and I want the house back." The lawyer nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We'll build a strong case. You have rights, Elise." As the legal proceedings began, I realized this was more than just a divorce. It was a fight for my identity, for my daughter's future, and for justice against the tyranny of Greg and Marian. Greg's reaction to the divorce papers was a mix of shock and anger. "You're making a mistake, Elise. You won't win this." But I was resolute. I had tolerated, endured, and sacrificed enough. It was time to reclaim my life and protect my daughter from the toxic environment Greg and Marian had created. I was no longer the passive, accommodating Elise. I was a mother, a fighter, and I was ready to take back control. The divorce proceedings were a cold, calculated dance of legal maneuvers and emotional confrontations. Greg's shock at my decision to leave quickly turned into a bitter determination to fight back. I sat in the lawyer's office, reviewing the documents. "He's contesting the custody of Mia," I said, my voice laced with disbelief. The lawyer nodded solemnly. "He's also challenging your claim to the house. But we have a strong case, Elise." As the legal battle ensued, my resolve hardened. This was no longer just about leaving a failed marriage. It was about standing up against the injustice and manipulation I had endured. In the midst of this, my father and I finalized our plan for the rental agreement. It was a strategic move designed to legally compel Greg and Marian to vacate my family home. One afternoon, I arrived at the house to deliver the new rental terms. Greg and Marian were waiting, their expressions a mix of defiance and curiosity. I handed Greg the document, watching his face as he read through it. His eyes widened in disbelief. "This is ridiculous. You're increasing the rent to an exorbitant amount." "Yes, Greg," I replied calmly. "That's the market rate for a property of this size and location." Marian interjected, her voice shrill with panic. "You can't do this to us, Elise. This is our home." "No, Marian," I countered, standing my ground. "This is my family home. You and Greg have made it clear that I'm not welcome here, so if you wish to stay, these are the new terms. Greg slammed the document on the table, his anger palpable. We'll fight this. You won't get away with it. But behind his words, I sensed his fear. The realization that they were losing control was dawning on them. As I left the house, a bittersweet feeling enveloped me. I had taken a significant step in reclaiming my home, but the sight of Mia's abandoned toys in the living room reminded me of the personal cost of this battle. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal appointments and emotional upheaval. I clung to Mia, her innocence and love, my anchors in the storm. During one of the hearings, Greg's true colors came to the forefront. Elise is unstable, Your Honor, he claimed. She's not fit to be a sole custodian. I listened, my heart pounding, as my lawyer countered his baseless accusations, with evidence of my stable income and loving relationship with Mia. In a subsequent meeting, Greg's lawyer proposed a settlement. Greg is willing to relinquish his claim to the house in exchange for joint custody and a reduction in the rent. I hesitated, torn between the desire to end this battle and the need to protect Mia from Greg and Marion's toxic influence. But then I remembered Mia's tears, Marion's callousness, and Greg's betrayal. This was no longer just about winning a legal battle. It was about justice and setting an example for my daughter. I refuse, I said firmly. I will not compromise on Mia's well-being or my family home. The decision to continue the fight was a difficult one, but it was necessary. I was no longer the woman who tolerated disrespect and manipulation. I was fighting for my rights, for my daughter's future, and for the dignity that Greg and Marion had tried to strip away from me. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready for whatever came next. The day of the final confrontation arrived like a storm on the horizon. Armed with the legal documents, I stood at the doorstep of what used to be my sanctuary, now a battleground. Greg opened the door, his face a mask of defiance. Marion hovered behind him, her eyes betraying her anxiety. "What do you want, Elise?" Greg asked, his tone icy. "I'm here to finalize the arrangements," I said, handing him the updated rental agreement. As he read, his expression shifted from confidence to disbelief. "This is absurd. You're demanding a rent that's beyond unreasonable." "It's the market rate for a property of this size in this location," I replied, my voice steady. "If you can't afford it, you'll have to vacate." Marion stepped forward, her voice trembling. "You can't do this to us. We have nowhere else to go." "That was your choice when you decided to push me out of my own home," I said, meeting her gaze. Greg slammed the document on the table. "We'll see what the court has to say about this. You're not going to get away with trying to evict us from our home." "This ceased being your home when you chose to disregard my rights and my feelings," I retorted. The air was thick with tension, the once familiar living room feeling like a foreign land. I looked around, memories flooding back, of laughter, of love, of a life that once was. Now it was just a shell, housing bitterness and betrayal. As I turned to leave, Marion's voice stopped me. "Elise, please. We can negotiate. There must be a way to resolve this." I paused, considering her words. Then, with a resolve that surprised even me, I said, "There's nothing left to negotiate. You made your decision when you chose to side with Greg against me and Mia." With that, I walked out of the house, leaving behind the echoes of a life that no longer existed. The days that followed were a mix of relief and uncertainty. The legal proceedings were grueling, but my resolve never wavered. I was fighting for my dignity, for my daughter, for the justice that had been denied to me. Eventually, the court ruled in my favor. Greg and Marion were given a month to vacate the property. The news hit them like a tidal wave, washing away the last vestiges of their control and arrogance. I watched from a distance as they moved out, their belongings a testament to their shattered dreams and misplaced ambitions. In their eyes, I saw the realization of their defeat, the understanding that their manipulations had backfired. As I stepped back into my family home, now empty of their presence, a sense of peace enveloped me. It was not the peace of victory, but the peace of justice served. I walked through each room, reclaiming the space that had once been ours, mine and Mia's. The walls that had witnessed so much pain now stood as silent sentinels to a new beginning. I knew the road ahead would be challenging. There would be wounds to heal, memories to reconcile. but for the first time in a long while I felt a sense of hope. I had fought against the odds, stood up to the tyranny of Greg and Marion, and emerged stronger. This was more than just a legal victory. It was a reclaiming of my life, a testament to the strength I never knew I had. The dust had settled, the legal battles were over, and the once turbulent house was now calm. As I stood in the empty living room, the memories of what had transpired echoed in the silence. Mia played in the corner, her laughter a balm to my weary heart. Watching her, I realized that this struggle, though fraught with pain, was necessary. It wasn't just a fight for a house. It was a battle for our future, for our peace. The day Greg and Marion left, I saw a glimpse of realization in their eyes, a dawning understanding of the consequences of their actions. Marion looked back at the house, her expression one of loss and regret. Greg, defeated and subdued, didn't meet my gaze. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I returned to my small business, finding solace in the familiar routine and the support of my regular customers. Mia thrived in the newfound stability, her resilience, a testament to the strength of our bond. One afternoon, as I was closing the shop, a familiar face appeared at the door. It was Greg. He looked different. The arrogance had left his eyes, replaced by a certain humility. "Elise," he began awkwardly, "I wanted to apologize for everything." I listened, a mix of surprise and skepticism. "Why now, Greg?" He sighed, a deep, weary sound. "Losing the house, the divorce, it made me realize how wrong I was, how much I lost because of my pride and my mother's influence." I considered his words, the years of pain and struggle flashing through my mind. "Your apology doesn't change what happened, Greg. But I accept it, for Mia's sake." Greg nodded, a look of relief passing over his face. "Thank you, Elise, and I'm sorry, truly." As he walked away, I felt a chapter of my life closing. Greg's apology didn't erase the past, but it offered a closure, a finality to the turmoil we had endured. In the months that followed, I renovated the house, turning it into a home once again. The walls were repainted, the rooms refurnished, and new memories were made. It was a sanctuary for Mia and me, a place of healing and growth. I often sat on the porch, watching Mia play in the yard, reflecting on our journey. The challenges had been immense, but they had also revealed a strength I never knew I possessed. I had stood up against injustice, fought for my rights, and reclaimed my life from those who sought to control it. It was a journey of self-discovery, of learning to trust in my own strength and resilience. In the end, this was more than just a story of revenge. It was a tale of empowerment, of rising above the trials and tribulations to forge a better future for myself and my daughter. The house, once a battleground of conflict and manipulation, was now a haven of peace and hope. It was a reminder that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the most rewarding victories. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the yard, I held Mia close, grateful for the journey that had brought us here. We had overcome, we had triumphed, and we were finally home.